Hello and welcome. You're watching In Conversation, and with me here today are two economy faculties, Basava sir and Raja sir. Hello, sir.
Hello, Ankit.
Hello, Ankit.
So, sir, in this video, we'll be discussing the overall trends regarding the economy paper in prelims, as well as how this year's paper is in comparison with last year's paper. So, Raja sir, how do you reckon this year's paper in terms of its difficulty? Was it more or less difficult than last year's?
See, on the day of the exam, 16th June, there was widespread perception that the paper was relatively easier. Not just economy, the whole paper was easier. But it has been more than 4-5 days, and now that the dust has been settled, we can speak the truth. After digging deeper into the questions, each and every question, yes, it may seemingly it is easier, but it's not as easier as it is being talked about. There are some questions where the statements are given in such a way that until and unless the student is aware of the minute details of each and every scheme, I don't think one can answer it. Okay, of course there are a couple of controversial questions as well.
So we'll come to financial market, but first let us address the most controversial question in this paper, that was on US debt.
Yes.
This was 31st question in set D.
Yeah.
So the controversy is more to do with the first statement. I think if you look at the question, it is seemingly easier, and most of the students that I have
See, what would
interacted
happen
with.
if US government were to default?
Default.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think the controversy was related to the aspect of exercise of claims by the debt holders.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
So, this is the bone of contention. If the United States of America were to default on its debt, holders of US Treasury bonds will not be able to exercise their claims to receive payment. So, what exactly is this? Does it mean they won't be able to exercise their claims to receive payment?
See, when you look at the word exercising their claims to receive payment, I think there is two ways to look at it. One is, can you actually sue the government if the government defaults on payment? Other way to look at the word exercising their claims is, can they actually seize the assets of the US government, and then get back their money? So let's look at the first thing, that is suing the government, right? You must understand there have been certain instances where governments have been sued for defaulting on their payment actually. Best example is Argentina. Argentinian government defaulted on repayment to the bond holders, and what actually happened is these investors who did not get back the money were actually from US.
Okay.
So the investors in US tried to sue the Argentinian government. This is one instance. Second instance is with respect to US government only. Historically speaking, it has been said that US government has defaulted on its bonds at least 4 times. This is at least that is written in the internet sources. And when it has defaulted in the past, actually people try to sue the US government. So if you interpret the word exercising claims as suing the government, then we can say yes,
You can sue the government.
you can sue the government.
In all the instances that you have just referred, did they receive payments?
They did not. They did not. In fact, I think with respect to exercising claims, the government generally enjoys a kind of sovereign immunity.
Yes.
So there was a particular document which I actually read in detail. In that particular document, they had clearly mentioned as to what would happen if the US government defaults on its bond payment. And it was mentioned that you can sue the government provided government allows itself to be sued.
Consent of the government is necessary.
Consent of the government is necessary to be sued, and I don't think that US government will allow itself to be sued by the bondholders.
Yes, especially non-US citizens.
Non-US citizens. Plus, it was explicitly mentioned in that particular document that US government, US Congress can enable the bondholders to sue the US government, and I would not see a situation where US Congress will allow the bondholders to sue the US government.
So now that sir has been saying that there is sovereign immunity.
Yes.
So whenever the government defaults, I don't think the common citizens or common investors can sue the government without the government's consent, at least with respect to United States of America.
Yes.
Okay. So how is it different from personal default. If a person or a financial
And
entity is
again,
defaulted.
or a corporate default.
Corporate default.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think we need to look at the second aspect of exercising claims. Like I said, there are
Can
two
you,
ways.
Can you recover the money from
Can
the
you
assets
recover
of
the
company?
money from the assets? Let's say there's a corporate entity which has issued the bond, and the corporate entity fails to repay the bondholder. Under the bankruptcy law, for example, in India, IBC, the bondholders can very well drag the company or the entity under the IBC, and then the company would undergo resolution or liquidation, whatever the case may be, and the bondholders would get back the money
From the sold off assets.
from
of
the sold off
company, yeah.
assets in either of the cases. So here, the law itself empowers the bondholders to exercise the claims
With respect to corporate default.
with respect to corporate default. But there is no such law which empowers the bondholders
to
to exercise that.
government and recover the money
To
from
recover the money.
government's asset.
Exactly.
And I think it is very weird to assume that the investors can attach or can confiscate the properties, because if you look at the statement 2, the statement 2 is actually right. USA government, the debt is not backed by any hard assets but only by the faith of the government,
Exactly.
which is true for most of the governments. The sovereign debt is never backed by any asset, which means the sovereign debt is unsecured.
Stable and more prosperous the government is, the more faith.
More
the
faith, it runs only on the faith, so not backed by any kind of physical assets.
Yes.
So there is no such mechanism of confiscation of assets as well. So I believe that, you know, if we combine the statement 1 and if you read the statement 1 and 2 together, the statement was fairly right.
Yeah. So I want to draw an analogy to this with respect to printing of notes by the central bank. You know, central bank on every note it prints
Promises to pay the
I
bearer.
promise to pay the bearer. The reason why the central bank says I promise to pay the bearer is because central bank has equivalent value of hard assets which it has kept. If it has issued a 500 rupee note, it means central bank has 500 rupee worth gold or foreign currency asset, right? So it has hard assets. But when the government borrows money, government is borrowing money on a soaring promise. It's a promise by the government that yes, it will repay back the money. So when you lend money to the government by buying a bond, you're just lending money purely based upon faith,
Yes.
based upon the faith
Faith
that
of the
yes,
government, yeah.
government will repay the borrowed money. And lastly, I would want to say, you have to see this question not from a legal aspect,
Exactly.
From a practical aspect, rather.
from a practical aspect or an economic aspect,
Economic
because it's an economic question.
Economic question.
Government has not kept aside any hard assets when it has borrowed money. So how can you recover that money? As simple as that.
So technically, there's no claim for
There's
a
no claim
bondholder
because
to recover its debt.
exactly, if you have kept any hard assets, then you can claim. There's no hard assets. So what you can claim, right?
So overall, first and foremost, there is legal vacuum with
Yes.
respect to the sovereign default.
Yes.
So there is no such law
Precedent,
as such.
yeah.
There is no such law.
Yeah.
Just like IBC is there for corporate default and personal default. And second thing, speaking from economic point of view, I believe that, you know, since it is unsecured debt and not backed by any hard assets and not backed, it's unsecured. So the investor has no right to confiscate any of his
kind of
assets.
assets, yeah.
So I think anybody can sue anybody in the court. So
Yes.
it doesn't mean that, you know, they are able to exercise their claims to receive the
Receive
payment.
the payment, exactly.
So which makes that, you know, statement 1 and 2 are right.
Statement 1 and 2 are right, and after the statement 1, if you add the because, I think statement 2 makes a complete
makes a
sense.
complete
Sense. So option A is the right answer.
Option A is the right answer.
Perfect.
So now, sir, let us move to the public finance section. Financial market section, because again, this was the most asked about topic in this year's prelims examination.
Biggest chunk has come from this chunk.
Yes. And also looking at the trend, mostly from the last 2 years, we have seen more emphasis by UPSC on
Finance market, yes.
So we'll start off with the first question in this segment. That was question number 83rd. And it asked us whether the following entities can trade in corporate bonds and government securities. And
securities.
these are 3 entities.
Yes.
So, sir, I think insurance companies and pension funds, they are one of the biggest institutional investors in these categories. So they automatically are correct answers.
Yeah.
And coming to retail investors, we saw only few years back, the RBI enabled even the retail investors
Retail
to
direct scheme.
invest in government securities.
Government,
yes,
And
yes.
this year, RBI came up with a portal also.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think so. This was the logic of asking this question.
Yes.
And all these three instruments, these three companies are eligible. So option D is the right answer.
Yeah.
Easy question, I believe. I think.
And the
anybody-
logic is very simple. I think the logic here the students should apply is, even if someone doesn't know about it, the logic is very simple. Corporate bond means company is borrowing money. Government securities is government is borrowing money. And obviously, when company and government borrows money, they'll borrow money from those entities which have surplus money.
Surplus money.
And who is sitting on a surplus money? Insurance
Institutional
companies,
investors,
institutional
retail
retail investors.
investors.
Mutual funds, pension funds. Yes.
I would say rather than factual, this was more application.
Application.
It was more application based question. So it's just you have to apply this knowledge कि company and government कहाँ से borrow करता है. Based upon that, you can easily get the right answer to this.
Perfect.
Now, sir, the next question, 82. And I think so, sir, the first statement of this question was most talked about because I saw many other
Yeah.
institutions, they came up with the fact that NBFCs are eligible for LF facility by the virtue that NBFCs can register themselves as primary dealers. But upon finding or going through the RBI website, I saw that there are only 21 primary dealers
Yes.
in the country.
There are
And
thousands of
NBFCs.
Yeah.
NBFCs.
Yeah.
As such, it was clearly mentioned by the RBI that that liquid adjustment facility by nature is available only for scheduled commercial banks and primary dealers. For primary dealers, you have to have a separate license for primary dealers. And it has nothing to do with your status as a finance company or non-banking finance company. So there might be one or two primary dealers who might have
The
NBFC
NBFC
license as well.
But that does not make this question.
They are availing the benefits of liquid adjustment facility as primary dealers
and
but not as
NBFCs.
Yes.
So the first statement is wrong in that aspect.
Yeah, and apart from that, I think there's a context to this particular statement also. Until 2023, RRBs were not given access to the LAF. Only in 2023, RRBs for the first time were given access to LAF facility, right?
Yes.
So, I think the motivation of this particular statement was from the recent context. So, if students know that RRBs have been given access to LAF, students should actually find out who all are the participants in the LAF window. And there you'll easily get to know it is only the scheduled commercial banks, primary dealers, and now we have added the new category of regional rural banks.
And any student is expected to know about this because this comes under the basic part of monetary policy.
Monetary policy, exactly. And apart from that, I just also want to point out here, NBFCs, I do remember for a brief period of time, they were given access to LAF facility. But that facility which NBFCs avail, it was not matter of right.
It was an exception.
It was an exception, and it was something which RBI enabled NBFCs. You can come and avail this particular facility. It is not a matter of right that NBFCs could avail.
That was only for a limited period
very
of
limited
time.
period of time.
That was in the backdrop of NBFC liquidity crisis that we
Yes.
have experienced in the last 2 years.
Exactly. And one must always keep this in mind when you solve questions in UPSC prelims. You should not take exceptions into consideration unless and otherwise
Unless it becomes a norm.
Yes, unless and otherwise it is explicitly mentioned in the statement itself.
True.
So if the statement would have been something like this, in India, NBFCs can access LAF window of RBI during exceptional circumstances.
Then it might have
Then
been correct.
it would have been correct.
Yes.
And sir, other two statements, the one regarding that financial institutional investors, they can hold government securities again is
They can
correct.
hold government
And the stock exchange can offer separate separate trading platform for debt.
A second statement is with respect to the inclusion of government bonds in the global bond indices,
yes.
like JP Morgan bond index. I think that is obviously correct. Third one is because I guess NSE has come up with a separate trading platform for bonds. Yeah.
So, but also I think so this year's prelims examination in a way was somewhat easier because I think they did away with the option of only one, only two.
Exactly.
So you have an option to eliminate even if you know
Yeah,
one or two
yeah.
statements.
This question, if somebody is aware of the first statement, I think the first two statements, even if they are not very much aware of the third statement, I think they still can arrive at the answer.
Yes.
So moving on to the next question, which was the last question in set D, with reference to Indian economy. What are the term collateral borrowing and lending obligations are instruments of?
Yes. Collateral borrowing and lending obligations, for all those who are viewing this, CBLO has been done away with by RBI and tripartite repo has replaced CBLO. But we have seen UPSC asking those instruments which have been out of date actually.
Yes.
Bank rate is one example.
Bank
So
rate is-
we RBI stopped giving loans under bank rate since since many years. But we have seen the bank rate term in UPSC exams and civil service exam prelims from time to time. But again, even if you're not aware of what collateral borrowing and lending obligations, if you're aware of the fact that it was a money market instrument, you can arrive at the answer.
Yes.
So option C was the right answer to this
Yes.
question. Then again, sir, 84th question. This we discussed earlier, that which of the following are considered as financial instruments?
Yes.
Now the first two options more or less are clear.
Mm-hmm.
The main controversy was over the third option,
third.
that was currency swap.
Exactly.
Whether are these agreements or are they financial instruments?
Yes.
So Baswa sir, what do you think? Currency swap, are they financial
See, I think
instruments?
for that you need to look at the definition of what exactly is a financial
Financial
instrument. Financial instrument always, for one, it can be an asset. For the other, it is a liability. So that is the basic definition of a financial instrument. So when you enter into a agreement with respect to currency swap, there is an obligation of there is a concept of asset and liability for the concerned parties. By default, it should be considered as a financial instrument for sure.
So from that, all these three are correct.
Yeah.
So if you see overall finance markets, I think it's the questions have been easier to medium category, barring few statements. Even there also we can arrive at the answer by elimination.
But what
through
is
elimination
key to
method.
note is that they did not went deep into the concept.
Exactly.
They touched upon the concept, expecting that the students will be able to
basic
answer these
understanding of the
questions. Yes.
financial markets.
So, sir, moving on to the next topic, that was banking and monetary policy. Historically, it has been the most
Important
important
thing.
topic from the UPSC prelim perspective. This year also, there are few questions. So, if we'll start off with
89.
NBFC question we have already discussed.
89.
89. That what are the following rules imposed by RBI with respect to foreign banks? Now, sir, in this, I think so. The second statement was very fact-based,
Yes.
because whether there are 50% of board members or another weightage, a student will have to know about the exact details in order to answer this statement correctly.
Yes.
And with respect to first statement,
There should be logically there should be a minimum capital requirement. RBI always laid on minimum capital requirement
again
for
for Basel norms.
for let's say payment banks, small finance banks, for all the categories of banks, there's always a minimum capital requirement. But what you must understand is every year UPSC has been asking questions with respect to regulation of banks. Last year there was a question with respect to regulation of urban cooperative banks,
Which was in news back then.
which was in news, and because Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020 was passed, because of that question was asked. But that question was expected also, because regulation of urban cooperative banks was very much in news. There was repeated failure of urban cooperative banks such as Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank. Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020 was also in news. So that question was completely expected. This question is completely unexpected
Because foreign banks have been operating for quite some time.
for quite a long time, and especially the second statement, I think it's too detailed a statement for a student to be aware of.
Whether 50% or 25 or 75 for that matter.
And
Actually, I'm sorry. Yes, we don't have any particular law. There has been no policy on foreign banks that has been unveiled very recently. But since few years, Reserve Bank of India has been asking all the foreign banks to turn their branches into wholly owned subsidiaries.
yes,
WOS.
Yes. So probably in that background, I believe that probably in that background the question might have been asked. But even then, we don't expect the students to know that the composition of the board of the directors.
yes.
So I think the second statement made the question difficult.
There are some questions which are made to be left out, and it is one such question.
Yes.
So, sir, this was B option correct because second statement is correct. Fact based again. So, moving on to the next question, which is 32nd. Now, this question pertains to syndicated lending. And I think so. Syndicated lending was in news few years back because of Nirav Modi incident.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because many banks pooled together their funds and offered the funds to the
Yes.
person in news. So, sir, the first statement with respect to this, I think so. It's a straightforward.
It's a easy. It's a first statement is easy.
And the second statement, whether this facility extends just to lump of funds or whether it extends
It's a
to credit line
Credit
also.
line. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think so. Nirav Modi scam was related to credit line only because PNB offered some kind of credit line to
Mm-hmm.
the person. So this question is, one can expect you to know about this, that in addition to lump of funds, we also offer credit line in form of
Exactly.
syndicated lending.
But here, I think what we can learn from this particular question is normally when we ask students to prepare for exam, the horizon of current affairs, we say 1 to 1.5 years, last 1 to 1.5 years. But syndicated lending was way back in news in the year, I guess, 2018
18,
19,
19, yes.
when RBI proposed that the guideline for syndicated lending may be revised.
Revised.
And it was not such a prominent news. So, for some strange reasons, UPSC has picked up this particular question on syndicated lending. I was actually expecting question on other aspects of banking which is in news. For example, you must be knowing unsecured lending.
Rising
Unsecured
unsecured
lending is rising. So I expected question with respect to unsecured loan. There might be a question, or a question on interconnected lending because that is also in news. But UPSC has asked a question on syndicated lending, which is little, I would say out of box.
So borrowing the World Cup analogy, when a player expects you to be a bouncer, UPSC throws up
Googly.
a googly.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, this is also a tough question in my opinion because of the second statement.
Yeah, yeah.
So banking
Now
and
there was this another question which was somewhat straight away related to the digital rupee.
Yeah, yeah. I think this was the most easiest question in the entire paper. It was a very straightforward question. No controversies over this question. It was very easy. And I think most of the students would have got it right.
In fact,
So because of only, you can say by the virtue of third statement being incorrect, that it is not, any kind of rupee is not insured against the inflation.
Yeah, exactly.
in fact, a question was asked on digital rupee last year, central bank digital currency and its potential applications.
But that question was difficult.
Exactly. That
This question was easy.
difficult. It is mostly based on the basic features of digital
Yes,
rupee.
yes. So the right answer in this particular case is 1, 2, and 4.
Option D.
Option D.
So now we'll come up and discuss the topic of schemes and policies. Because few years back, UPSC was not asking questions related to this topic. But last year we saw questions on schemes. And this year the trend has continued. So you can see straight away from an economic point of view, the question appeared on Digital India Land Records Management Program. Again, sir, this is again a very fact-based question.
Exactly.
Because whether it is a central sector or centrally sponsored scheme, you'll not be able to mark the first option incorrect without knowing this fact.
Yes.
And the second and third fact are exactly fact-based, which are picked up from the objectives of the scheme.
Exactly.
So, sir, Raja, sir, this question, how do you reckon? Was it medium or was it difficult?
I still call it difficult for the mere reason that when we read a scheme, often we tend to ignore such kind of from economic point of view. We tend to ignore who is implementing it and what is the funding pattern. I think we have to concentrate on these minute aspects as well from now on. Not just this question, Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. Even if you come to the question number 49, question number 50, Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan Yojana. Even though the fourth statement, family pension is applicable to the spouse and unmarried daughters. So that is too much of a minute detail. We don't expect the students to go that deeper when they read the schemes.
Again, the entry age group for the beneficiaries, whether 18 to 40 or 21 to 40.
Yes. So while preparing for schemes, I think we have to be very conscious, and we have to remember all the provisions of the scheme thoroughly,
and understand also the objectives, what the scheme is trying to do, and correlate with the.
And another important thing, if you look at your main syllabus also, I think when we prepare for UPSC prelims, we tend to focus only on the prelim centric part.
Exactly.
But you must also understand that sometimes questions are also asked from the mains aspect of economic. For example, in mains, there is a explicit syllabus, public distribution system, its functioning, its limitations, salient features. And I do remember at least twice questions has been asked with respect to NFSA,
Yes.
National Food Security,
Security
Act. Same way, in the main syllabus, you have a separate topic of land reforms. And this is something that we normally teach the students in the mains module, that is Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. So if someone is well aware of what exactly is land reforms all about, what exactly is modernization of land records, such a student will be able to correctly answer this. Coming to the first statement, provides 100% funding. One of the biggest reason why we have not been able to modernize the land records is because of lack of
Reluctance of
focus by the state government.
governments.
So that is why the central government will obviously take a lead and provide
in this.
funding.
Okay.
So that way, I think you have to look at the mains aspect of the syllabus
So
as well.
in a way, you are trying to say that you can't prepare prelims individually when you're preparing.
Individually.
You have
So
to
there are
prepare
like
them in
integrated.
togetherness, yeah.
So
can't
there are
be
some
in
aspects
silos.
of mains we'll have to integrate. And based upon these 4 questions with respect to schemes, policies, and initiatives.
There was another question called on
CSR,
CSR,
exactly.
corporate social responsibility.
So what I would want to say to students is, just because you have got 4 questions this time on schemes and policies, doesn't mean that you have to sit and study all the schemes and programs.
They come up with thick booklets.
Thick booklets.
300 pages.
In that
booklets.
case, the schemes and programs will become a separate subject
itself.
So what is the right strategy to prepare for schemes and policies? The right strategy is to remember the schemes and policies which are in news. Best example is Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandhan.
Yojana.
It is something which is in news,
Trying to ensure financial inclusion.
financial inclusion. So anything which is to do with social development, financial inclusion, and if you actually compile those important schemes, like last time there was a question on Atal Pension
Atal
Yojana.
Pension Yojana. Again,
And this
same.
time it is Shram Yogi Mandhan, right?
Yes.
So I think if you carefully look at the important schemes and policies, you can just know about these policies. And with respect to
I think
schemes,
so students might have prepared for NPS this year.
NPS, yes, new pension scheme.
So I think one should be thorough with all the schemes and policies which have some relevance with the main syllabus.
Main syllabus.
So all the schemes and policies, because inclusive growth as a
Exactly.
trend is
Broader
mentioned in
topic
the
there in the main
syllabus
section.
actually. So all the insurance schemes and pension schemes and all these schemes should be covered under that.
So
chapter.
under that, what you should know, what kind of scheme it is, centrally sponsored or central sector. Second, the nodal ministry,
Ministry.
which is implementing. Third thing, what are the salient features of that particular scheme?
True.
So I guess with respect to Atal Pension Yojana, the same statement was used. That is, family pension is available to spouse.
Yes.
It was a statement which was used, which was asked with respect to Atal Pension Yojana, which was asked in one of the previous year prelims as well. So it is a very specific aspect about the scheme. So those things they have to keep in mind.
Yes. So
And this Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Mantritva Abhiyan, the first statement had 2 parts.
Yeah.
First was provision of antenatal care service to women in their period of pregnancy and after pregnancy.
After.
So during the period of pregnancy, the statement was right, but the scheme does not provide any benefits post the pregnancy period.
Delivery. Yeah, exactly.
And the second statement is correct,
Correct.
because to supplement the initiatives by the government, even the private sector help was
Yes,
enrolled.
yes.
some questions appeared from the basic concepts.
Basic concepts.
which
Now
can
again,
be answered from-
students I think focus more on current affairs. They try to keep up with the current affairs, and in that way they forget the basic
Basic
concepts.
part.
Yes.
And these 2 questions are exactly summarizes why you need to prepare the basic subjects even from the NCRTs.
Yes.
The first question was very basic on economic activity and what kind of sectors are they related to.
Yeah.
That you have to understand the difference between primary,
secondary, and tertiary.
activities.
Exactly.
And that storage of any produce, be it agricultural or industrial equipment,
It's always
all these
tertiary.
are services.
Service
so
sectors.
tertiary sector. And weaving cloth, again, you utilize raw cotton, so it is a secondary.
Second.
Now, so another question appeared in this basic concepts are the physical capital.
Physical capital. Exactly.
Whether are they working capital or fixed capital. So working capital, I understand, are short-term capital which you use in your day-to-day activities.
Raw materials, basically.
Raw materials. And fixed capital is something you invest on your business.
It's like a capital goods.
It's an asset.
Capital goods.
It's a capital
an asset.
goods.
So from that logic, petrol and yarn used by weaver are examples of working capital, whereas plow and computer, they are fixed capital.
Fixed capital.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an easy question.
Now, so moving on to the external sector.
Yes.
I remember you were highlighting that primarily the questions were related to trade aspect,
Yeah.
but now the focus have shifted to aspects of other countries.
So, with respect to external sector, from last 5 years, what has been happening is they have been asking questions with respect to general trends.
Exactly.
General trends with respect to imports, exports. For example, in prelims 2020, there's a question as to with respect to present status of India's external trade. Consider the following statements. So questions were with respect to general things. But from last 2 years, rather than asking general trends, they have been asking question with respect to a specific commodity. Last year, there was a question with respect to specific commodities, gold. So you must have seen that question, Switzerland wala.
Yes.
And this time, a specific question with respect to apples. And there's a reason.
Student must be wondering, Apple, Kashmir or Himachal se nahi aata kya? US se mangane ki
No,
kya
but
zarurat
this
hai?
was in news actually. This was in news. Import of apples from US was in news, and it was in news with respect to. See, you must be knowing that US revoked the GSP status to India. In retaliation, India imposed higher custom duty on import of apples from USA. And then later, India and USA decided to resolve their trade dispute, and India reduced the custom duty on apple. And some of the opposition parties had raised concerns with respect to reduction in custom duty on apple. Because it was in news, I guess it was there in the Indian Express expense
That's
section.
why specifically they asked on question on apples.
Apples, exactly.
Earlier, questions from external sector used to test the conceptual knowledge of balance of payments and
How
which of the
this affects Indian economy. in
Indian
general.
economy, and even questions like on exchange rate, near versus rate.
Surprisingly, this time there's no question
There are
on
no
exchange
such
rate.
questions. I think these kind of questions can be answered more based on the current affairs knowledge
Current
or
affairs.
your newspaper reading rather than the core conceptual understanding. The same thing goes with the question number 47, about the Venezuela crisis.
So this time, once again, that pattern has got changed in the external sector. When UPSC says Indian economy, it's not just about Indian economy now, it is becoming international economy now. Because you are expected to know what is happening at the international level also.
Not just in US but in Venezuela. also.
Venezuela also,
So
exactly.
I think the key takeaway from these two questions from external sector is that keep reading newspapers, at least for the basic understanding.
Just like when you're reading in the IR section,
Yes,
you
yes.
focus on places in news. Next time when you're reading the business page, you keep focusing on important events, economic events happening in other countries.
Countries in crisis.
Yes.
So, sir, with respect to Venezuela question, I saw the news that Venezuela has somewhat recovered from its economic crisis.
Yeah.
But has it led to prevent people from fleeing the country?
Even I was confused here with respect to statement 1. Actually, Venezuela has achieved a recovery from its crisis, and it is like clocking good GDP growth. But what is the key takeaway from this particular statement is the first word, rapid. Very rapid, right? That is the first part. And second one is it has still not been able to prevent its people from emigrating to other countries. So because of the word rapid and because it has failed to prevent the people from migrating, the statement 1 should
is
be incorrect.
And second statement.
Even the recovery that you're talking about, the Venezuela had experienced, of course, the GDP has been growing good, but that was mostly because of the base effect.
Because of low base.
Because of the
Low
low
base
base effect.
exactly.
It doesn't mean that they have recovered from the crisis yet. So the first statement is in that case it is
It
wrong.
is incorrect.
And second statement is straightforward because
Straightforward.
the first fact we know
Yeah.
about Venezuela is that the country has its largest oil reserve.
Yes.
Now, sir, another question was there on infrastructure.
Yes.
Again, this concept of Greenfield and Brownfield project have somewhat been more talked about.
Yeah.
But what is not talked about these three airports? Well, obviously, Raja sir will know about Vijayawada International Airport because he
Even
is
I'm
from
not aware
Andhra.
of the fact that it is a greenfield airport or a brownfield airport.
Again, so you can understand this was entirely fact-based.
Yes.
So, Donny Polo Airport, which is in Itanagar, and Kushinagar Airport in UP, these two are greenfield projects,
Yes.
and Vijayawada is a brownfield project.
Brownfield project.
This was completely unexpected because normally from the theme of infrastructure, we'll ask the students to focus on schemes, policies like
Infrastructure,
NMP,
Energy sector.
finance
energy
instruments,
sector, right?
infrastructure finance instruments like InvITs, rates, NIF.
Exactly.
These have
kind
been
of,
in news
these
the
have been
past
in
few
news,
years again.
exactly.
And this was very factual question actually because it's very difficult to remember कि कौन-कौन से airport greenfield है, कौन-कौन से
And
airport
these are not
brownfield है.
more talked about airports. These are
Exactly.
somewhat less talked about.
Yeah.
This is one such question which is supposed to be left alone.
Left. Exactly.
So that's about the paper.
So, sir, how should a student prepare for next year's prelim? That probably is the most
Yes.
weighted upon topic of this year's podcast.
Okay, so one thing is for sure, the overall theme, the weightage for Indian economy is going to remain same, which is like 15 to 20. And from that, major emphasis or majority of the questions are going to be asked from the theme of banking and
Banking and
finance. That is for sure. That is not going to change. But within the theme of banking and finance, more emphasis should be on financial market. And as discussed before, from capital market and money market, no need to go into a lot of depth, lot of details. If you have a basic understanding about what is capital market, money market, the instruments, that is more than sufficient. As far as the banking and finance, external sector, from last 2 years, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to important commodities like apple and gold. So next time students come across any important commodity, then people should look out for that. For example, cocoa is something
Cocoa is in news
is in
because
news.
of rising prices.
Yeah. So cocoa or say wheat is also in news. Rice is also in news. So some important commodities which is in news, people should keep an eye for those things. And another important thing which has been happening is core concepts. Students generally tend to ignore the core concepts.
They focus more on current
More on the
developments.
current development. So the core concept from NCRTs will always play important role. At least 2 to 3 questions
As
can
we
be
saw
asked.
this year also. Two
Yes.
questions straight
Yeah,
away.
2 questions plus another question on TFR, total fertility rate, right? So that is how people should keep in mind from this particular year's paper.
And from schemes point of view, Raja sir, what do you think? How should a student approach? Should they read about all the schemes, or should they be smart and selective about those?
See, for schemes, there are n number of schemes, and then it is humanly impossible to mug up all the schemes and all the provisions. But I suggest students to focus upon all those policies and schemes which have relevance to UPSC main syllabus. The inclusive growth, the agriculture marketing, land reforms, and let's say
economic and social development.
Yes,
these
exactly.
kind of topic infrastructure, even that. So there are a lot of initiatives the government has been taking with respect to these topics. So I think even your mains preparation would enable you to understand that these are the schemes and these are the policies that I need to focus upon, because you need to mention them in your answers. So going a bit deeper into it and understanding their basic provisions would not do any harm. And I think
it will only enrich the knowledge.
And that is, I don't expect students to go beyond that, and because the cost benefit ratio is very low. And second thing, apart from the core concepts, as Basava sir said, that one should always be very strong at the concepts, because your conceptual knowledge will enable you to eliminate the options. So that's what I always call application of knowledge. If not the basic information based questions, even you can answer application based questions. And second thing is the current affairs. So the way we read current affairs, the way we prepare current affairs needs to be changed a bit. Let's say
you have to be a bit smart about
it, because see, current affairs is giving you a chance to go into the concepts. For example, RBI has enabled regional rural banks the LAF facility. So you should have that curiosity in you to understand
what is LAF facility.
what are other participants in the LAF. So who were actually excluded from the LAF, whether NBFCs are eligible or not. So the first thing that you need to know is whether small finance banks can avail the benefit of LAF or not, because these are differentiated banks. What kind of differentiated banks can access LAF or not? So these are the questions that you need to ask yourself, rather than reading the current affairs in silos. That's what I believe.
So we'll conclude. This was all for today's In Conversation video. Stay tuned with our YouTube channel for more updates. Until then, a very good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Basava sir. Thank you, Raja sir.